Welcome to the Marketing Stir podcast by Sterista, probably the most entertaining marketing podcast you're going to put in your ears. I'm Jared Walls, associate producer and Sterista's creative copy manager. The goal of this podcast is to chat with industry leaders to get their take on the current challenges of the market, but also have a little fun along the way. In this episode, Vincent and Ajay chat with Eric Duerr, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Domo. He explains how a degree in philosophy led him to a career in marketing, and how the art of persuasion isn't the same as manipulation, and why you should strive for the former. Ajay gets a steroid shot, and Vincent wears a Hawaiian shirt. Give it a listen.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time once again. I'm Vincent Petrofessa, so that must mean that the marketing stir is happening. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's so good to be here. I am, again, the co-host of the Marketing Stir, Vincent Petrofessa, the Vice President of B2B Products and Partnerships at Sterista. It is so great to be here on video. I've got my crazy Hawaiian shirt on. We're having fun. Of course, I have a Hawaiian shirt. I'm a dad. This is what you do when you're a dad. With me, as always, another dad, not my dad, that would be weird, is my co-host. You know him, my commander-in-chief, Mr. Ajay Gupta. What's going on, Ajay?
Hey, Vincent. So are there people that tell you it's a cool shirt?
Just myself. No, no one has. The guy who works at Kohl's, where I bought it, said, hey, that's a cool shirt, man.
No, it makes sense. When I look at you, I do think that's the right shirt for you.
Thank you. So wait, so you're saying I'm not cool. I love it. Thank you so much. I love, it's those words of wisdom, Ajay, that keep me motivated every day. Thank you so much. What's good with you? How's everything out there?
Good. I got a steroid shot on my wrist today, so it's feeling a lot better.
All right. Yeah. So speaking of cool, that's something. So
yeah.
Because the tennis, you pulled it?
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but after a couple of months, you expect it to go away, but it's there and nagging. But back in time for the podcast.
That's good. That's dedication right there. Yeah, I had a few cortisone shots in my knee, old football injuries, flag football injuries mostly. Nothing cool. I actually never got hurt when I played actual football, high school football. Let's not get carried away here. But awesome. We're glad you are with us. We are certainly glad that this next gentleman is with us. I had met this gentleman a few weeks ago, hit it off. I love his background. I love his story. Very fun guy, informative. We'd love to welcome to the Marketing Stir podcast, the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Domo. Put your hands together out there virtually for Mr. Eric Duerr. What's going on, Eric?
Hey, Vincent. Thanks for having me. That's a thunderous applause on this void Zoom call.
Exactly. Yeah, I told you. The guests always say, they're like, wow, that's a little over the top, my introduction. But hey, I love it. We're happy to have you here. And it's you're joining us from Utah. We have Utah, New York, Texas, 3 states, 3 time zones. So we welcome you in. Eric, tell us about yourself, your position there at Domo, and then enlighten us and the listeners more about Domo.
Yeah, so great to be here. I am new at Domo. This was a kind of one of these company I've been looking at for quite a while. I think they're really interesting. We are traditionally seen as in the business intelligence space. So the way I like to tell people is we help you gather, see, and use your data. And which data? All your data. Makes it a really fun category to play in, because what business doesn't have data? And what we do is we talk about the business cloud. And I think data right now in this kind of goofy COVID world is really, really interesting. We've all become data experts. We all became BI experts. Like, your parents are like getting news and data every day and trying to figure out what to do with it. And businesses are no different. So it's a really fun time to be in this space of data and how you use data and how it's transforming companies, and basically run the marketing group and you know, from all aspects, from the campaigns to the messaging to, you know, our go-to-market.
And Eric, one of the questions we always love asking our guests, because some of the stories are all over the place. We always love asking our guests, like, how did you get into marketing?
Yeah, so it's funny. Everyone does have an interesting way they get into marketing. And either they started in PR, they started in product or something like that. I started with a philosophy degree. I was a philosophy major in college. And then I also had a finance degree, but at the end of college, I looked at the jobs that were available to finance people, and they looked really, really, really boring. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem like fun. I'm going to start an agency. And that agency really took what I had learned in philosophy around persuasion, and we started giving speeches about that. And then luckily, one day, we got picked up by Microsoft. And someone from Microsoft said, hey, can you help our sales team become more persuasive? And I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. And it was the MSN group. This is like MSN 1999. And so it was like they didn't know how to talk about technology to a media person. And so we applied the rules of Aristotle's rhetoric to a sales team to help them become more persuasive. And that began this whole cycle into kind of sales enablement, then into like positioning. And then here's my trick. If you want to succeed in business without really trying, make an executive look good on stage. And so we could do that, and they were loving us. They're like, holy cow, you can now distill a complex product strategy or a very hard to describe offer to a group. And so suddenly we were writing speeches for all the executives at Microsoft. And that idea of persuasion somehow got me into marketing. And it's really funny because when I hang out with other CMOs, I'm like, I don't know if I'm like you. I didn't come up creating demand gen. I wasn't like a search dude. I was like the Aristotelian logic guy. And so anyway, but here I am. It's been a good ride. I've enjoyed it.
That is an awesome story, Eric. Definitely a first for us in the podcast. So how difficult was it to jump into entrepreneurship right after college?
Probably harder than I thought it was. My dad was always an entrepreneur. And so I guess I had that like little bug about like, I don't want a boss. Even right now being at Domo, I'm like, no, this is totally cool. I'm happy being here. What do you mean I have to be there at what time, right? So there's always that thing in you that is irrational. But I'm okay with a pretty big risk tolerance. And so the hardest thing of starting a business is two things. One, if you don't believe you're going to be bankrupt in 6 months, then you're not paranoid enough. Like you just got it, like you have that mindset. And then are you okay not having that long financial stability that you think, and you watch other people who just get paychecks every 2 weeks and like, oh, you have it so easy. Particularly when you get employees and you're like worried about all the mouths to feed. I mean, it's like you're smoking air cigarettes and freaking out. But if you can do that, that's good. The thing I loved about starting off this way is it really made you curious about what other people were doing. And so you go back to a place like Microsoft, I would meet anybody. I'd be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a product management guy for the open dialogue box in Office. I'm like, whoa, cool. Tell me more about that. And so suddenly it's not like you're trying to get them as a client, but you're certainly trying to figure out how their world connects to your world into other things. And I had seen that at places like Microsoft and other large companies where there was just a lack of curiosity amongst the employees because you're just overwhelmed with what you had. And so as a result, at 22, you start building a sense of curiosity. You start building a network. You realize how important that network is. And that's that entrepreneurial spirit that you could have if you have your own business, or you could just have anyway. Like, I don't think you need to, be freaking out about cash flow. You could be a regular job and still have that curiosity about you.
That makes a lot of sense. I took a couple of years before I started Starista, but definitely had a very similar experience jumping into it. And I'm often asked, "What did you do before?" And I say, "Not a whole lot."
It's consuming, right?
Yep. Yep. And then I saw on your LinkedIn you started at Rocket Fuel. Was that shortly after your entrepreneurship ended?
Yeah, well, one agency went for 15 years, and then I started a second one, and I was very happy there. I called it the Shire. Like it was smaller. We had, a handful of clients, and we were doing strategic positioning, and it was just a very simple offer, and it was great. And one of our clients was Rocket Fuel, and the CEO asked if I would come run their marketing, and I was really. It was an interesting offer because I had never thought of myself as a marketer at that point. I was like, wow, run marketing. That seems like a really interesting thing. And not only is it interesting, it was interesting because it was all of marketing. And so it was product marketing and all the demand gen and all the PR and the referencing programs, and everything was like rolling under one program. And it was a public company. And so it was and it was a company that was going through a massive transformation. And so all those things seemed like it's like, wow, this isn't going to be a regular job. This is going to be quite a project.
And Eric, I want to learn more about Domo. We'll get to that in a moment, but I'm fascinated with his philosophy background and, what specific philosophies. I think I took one philosophy class, but are there specific philosophies that you apply to marketing and specifically maybe marketing at Domo?
Yeah, there's the types of philosophy. So if you study, philosophy, of course, is super broad. It's literally the Greek word is love of wisdom. And so there's a lot of that out there. And there's, Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy and ancient and modern and postmodern. And so I spent a lot of time with Greek philosophy and Greek philosophy and rhetoric into the philosophy of language. And so the Greeks were really good at creating, what they would call the polis, the people. And so if you read a lot of Plato, it's all about like the system of government and how do we govern one another through a Socratic method. So that Socratic method is that idea of question and answer, question and answer, question and answer. And if anyone's out there and they've never read Plato, they want a little bit of Plato, go read the Meno. It was, it's a very short text, and it's just a simple text where Socrates asks, can virtue be taught? And it's just a wonderful thing about, a simple question. But the other philosophies that you can extend on, like I just mentioned Aristotle's rhetoric, which says, persuasion comes from your ability to have ethos, pathos, and logos. So ethos, do I come across as credible? So right now in this podcast, people are listening or viewing me and wondering, oh, is he a credible person? So we build up credibility. We talk about, he was the CMO of a public company. He ran his own agencies. He's worked at Microsoft. Those are all reasons to believe that I'm your doctor. You should listen to me. Okay, and so there's that kind of, and that's persuasion, right? Just do this because you believe I'm an ethical person. I have credibility. And then the second one would be logos. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do I say it in a sequence that is memorable or at least goes through your brain and like, oh, that makes sense. I now understand. Why should you wear a face mask? Well, there are some logical reasons why you should do that. And you either believe in that logic or you don't. And then the third one is, sorry, I couldn't resist that one. And then the third one is pathos. And that is your ability to empathize with somebody. Like, do you find them as a nice person? I'm glad we're doing this as video so we can all have a little bit of fun and, look at your outrageous outfits. But that is a way of creating pathos, right? It's seeing the human element of us. And depending on where you're trying to persuade somebody, you may or may not want to use one of those, or you use them in combination. So for example, if you get pulled over, or if you have a speeding ticket and you're in front of a judge, a pathos argument isn't going to win. judge. Look, I'm a nice guy. I've got 2 kids. I volunteer. I'm sorry I was going 10 over, but you really, I mean, if you knew me, you wouldn't give me this ticket, right? A pathos argument's not going to work. A logos argument would work. Hey, here's some precedent. Here's some other facts and figures. And then, the judge is like, okay. So understanding when and how to use these modes of persuasion will help you get your way. In marketing, we are in the business of persuasion. Like if you think you're not, then you're in the wrong category, right? So we are here to persuade someone to do something they otherwise wouldn't go do. Otherwise, why would you need marketing? And so this idea of arguments in a way that is healthy, like what is the argumentative format that you're taking to persuade me to go do this thing? And I think marketing as a whole often misses this. They miss it, and there's an alternate. I'm going to just stop there because I don't want that answer to go like for 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, but it's I love that. It's a different it's a different philosophy, pun intended, than a lot of the people we had on have. So we love that. Is that what makes you different? You would say in marketing?
I would. In fact, what I hear from marketers that make me, the type of marketing I hear that just makes me cringe. One is we're storytellers. We're all storytellers. That's what we do. We're here to tell stories. And I think storytelling is a very powerful vehicle in persuasion, but it has to sit within the argumentative framework. And so it's funny, we ran research. We asked a bunch of marketers how good a storyteller they are compared to their peers. And it's overwhelming. Everyone believes they're a better storyteller than their peers are, which doesn't even make statistical sense, right? Like we can't all be better than the other people. But in marketing, we believe that to be true. We just believe we're these great storytellers, and that is how we're going to persuade. But it's not. It's a mechanism within that argumentative framework. And you see it in bad marketing. You see it in bad speeches. How many speeches have you heard where someone just describes the thing instead of persuading? Hi, I'm Eric. Let me talk to you about my product. My product is great. It's up, They go on and on and on and on. And there's no, like, where are you pushing me to? And so you see that often in marketing. Some of my favorite people in marketing to work with are ad copy because they get it. There's this idea of a syllogism, and a syllogism for, again, more, philosophy here, is a major premise, minor premise, irrefutable conclusion. Major premise, Socrates is a man. Minor premise, all men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is dead. And so if you look at ad people, especially ad creative, they get that syllogism in their head. They understand, like, oh, if I can get you on a major premise and a minor premise, I don't have to argue the conclusion. The conclusion will come out of your head. Because you love your family, Allstate, right? And so you see those kind of that logical thinking in an argumentative format. But in so much other marketing, especially B2B marketing, we just want to go on and on and on and on about our features and buzz, speeds and feeds about our product. And we forget that argumentative framework.
Eric, since you are pretty new at Domo, but I'm curious, what is the framework for Domo being the better or the best product?
Ooh, boy, that's a good one. So here's the argument I would say to people right now that are looking at Domo or in this category. So we all just had our work from home experiment globally. And that shook up businesses pretty, some of them did well, some of them did not do well. But what we know as my major premise is that data is going to be core to the recovery of your business. I think most people would agree to that. If you don't agree with me, then the rest of the argument's not going to hold true. Someone's like, no, chocolate chip cookies are the center of the recovery of our business. We got an Otis Spunkmeyer. We're going to just, people will smell the cookies. We're good to go. But if you believe that data is at the core of your recovery strategy, then I've got you on my first premise. My minor premise would be you probably don't have a handle on your data at all. That too much of your data is dark, meaning it's inaccessible. It lives in spreadsheets. There's too much tacit knowledge. When we all work from home, we avoid those casual collisions of running into people at the water cooler. You also have other problems with your data in that you have some of it on premise and some of it's in the cloud and some of it's held by Salesforce and some of it's over here. And so you have a data problem. And it's not just a tactical problem, it's now a strategic problem because, as I said in the major premise, data is at the core of your recovery strategy. Therefore, you have to think about how you do data differently. And that would be my conclusion. So if I can get them on those two, like data is important, we don't have a handle on our data, so therefore we have to do it differently. I've now opened the door to have a conversation. And it's not about we're better than the other people. It's not like, hey, we just have twice as this. We have a different approach. And you're open to it because I've kind of walked you down that path.
It's pretty good, Eric. I like it.
Good. Day 2 on the job.
So the other question I had was, you came back, looks like in a CEO role at Yestler. And tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like, being in control again without having a boss to report to.
Well, so yeah, Yestler was really interesting. After Rocket Fuel, I came back because I had an agency still. I came back to my agency and I had never thought I would create an agency that would run on its own. I just thought like I was creating it for me to have a playground, really, and do cool work with great clients. And after being there, like I came back and it was a little bit like, oh, hey, you're back. Great. We're so excited. And it occurred to me I needed to either come back and like really take this agency and take it to the next level, or I needed to do something else with it. And at that time, Yestler, who is a wonderful B2B agency, one of the largest in the US at the time it was, and they approached me because we had very complementary services. We had all this argumentative theory, we had all this strategic positioning, we had all this, and they were the demand center for so many big clients. We shared a lot of the clients. So they approached me and asked if I would join them and sell the agency. And I said, that would be fantastic. And so when I went to Yestler, when they bought the agency, I was actually more in a chief growth officer role, which basically is like, hey, how do you merge these two things together? Make sure the people land, make sure the clients are okay, and then how do we activate our clients with these joint offers? And it was a lot of fun. It was neat. Yestler had 300 employees. We had 10. So that was a lot of fun just to see how do you run an agency that large? And that was a lot of fun to see. And then after about 2 years, no, I guess it was a little less than 2 years, we finished up all the integration work. All the clients were happy. And then they had an opportunity to sell into Accenture. And that was a really great opportunity for them. And they went forward and they are now part of Accenture marketing operations. And at that point, it was a good time for me to go because as much as I like the Yestler team, as much as I like Accenture, me in a marketing operations role just wouldn't be, it's not where I am. And hence I was pretty happy to, find Domo.
Yeah. Well, and Eric, what do you think, well, obviously there's a lot of differences, but, for a big chunk of your career there, you were involved, like you said, in an agency where you got to work with a variety of clients, but potentially a variety of domos in the case. What do you think is going to be or what has been your biggest transition besides, as we were joking now, you're not working for yourself, but, the transition from now being one client, essentially?
It's so hard not to get on the airplane when the real work starts. So like, that's the joke with the agency work is, you just don't have to be there, for everything to happen. And so, you're responsible. You have a number. And our chief revenue officer is, he's British and he's grumpy and he is like, I need more for marketing. And when has a marketing person not heard that before? Like that is like and you look at the amount of, we have about 2,000 customers. I think we should have 20,000. There's no reason. And so the challenge I have is not to just whiteboard this stuff out, but to really say, okay, where will we go get this demand? And where are we willing to put the bets? And it's just hard, right? I mean, you got to grind it out. There's not a magic bullet any marketer has where they just say, if I just fix this one thing, everything else is going to, come into play. So it's just going to be, we just got to hit it day after day after day after day.
And for those of the people listening, talk to us, Eric, about an ideal customer who could really benefit from the Domo software.
I would say probably two types of customers. One, if you're a CIO, especially where you have a mature data business and you have, you've invested in data lakes or you have a data warehouse, you have who knows how many transitions into different SaaS providers. You also have a ton of on-prem stuff locked up. I mean, people rolling Hadoop clusters down the hallway. I mean, you've got data like all over the place. And the thing you need to figure out is like, well, how do I create data as a value? And that is a really hard thing because you need to be able to connect and transform it. And that basically means, in English, that means, how do I get to talk to one another? And there's this thing called Dude's Law that I absolutely love. Dude's Law from the Lebowski. Thank you. So there was this guy wrote this law based off that movie, and I really liked it. It said the value is equal to the importance of the why divided by the how, which basically means if I ask a question, a why question, how hard is it to answer that? And if it's too hard to answer that question, and that question's not that valuable, then you don't ask that question. I'll give you a quick Microsoft example. I was writing a speech for this guy. He was in charge of a big platform. And he said, hey, Eric, I need a number on our growth percentage of this thing over this, whatever. It was a specific thing he wanted. And I said, okay, let me go ask the team. 7%. He's like, oh, that was fast. I was like, right. He's like, how'd you find that? I made it up. He's like, you can't do that. I was like, yes, I can. Because your question to answer it would take 30 people 2 weeks to do this. And it's not that important of a question. It's a silly question. Now, the question wasn't wrong for him to ask, but the amount of effort to go answer it would just take too much. And so what people like Domo need to do is we need to make that how very, 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 very easy. We need to get that how, that number in the denominator, very small. So then you can start asking silly why questions. Like, it's a perfectly reasonable question. It's just too hard to answer. And so if you're a CIO or if you're a business that, one way to look at it is like, what's the simplest question you can't ask of your business and you ought to be able to, but it's just too complicated. And that is when you can make it that easy and you can democratize it. So it's just not a group of business analysts who are answering it. It's everybody. That people can self-serve and ask questions of the business no matter how silly they are, because you just don't know if they're silly or not. Like there has to be some curiosity in it. And if we're just like looking at, lagging indicators, how much revenue, what's our cash management, what's our inventory supplies, that's not how you're going to compete moving forward. If data is an asset, again, back to that syllogism, if data is core to your recovery, you have to, and my point there was you have to be able to do it differently. You have to be able to do it differently with curiosity. If you're going to do it with curiosity, you have to remove the friction in how you ask questions of that data. And so those are the customers we want to go party with. I think we can do a lot with them. I think they can do a lot with their business. And the more gnarly and complicated the data problem is, the better it's going to work out. Because data is messy, it's dark, it's all over the place, and it will always be like that. Like, it's never going to get cleaned up.
Eric, often when I'm going through the financial review for the business every year, I want to answer the questions the same way. It's like, it's $400. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Make them up.
So Eric, if you decide to open a CPA practice one day, count me in as a client.
That's right.
So one of the questions I have for you is, you've quoted from Aristotle to Big Lebowski in a good 40-minute span, which is awesome. Is there a marketing company or that you particularly like their messaging and advertising, and you're like, wow, these guys really get it?
In the B2B space, I mean, the ones I always like are the ones that understand the person they're trying to convince. And I've always been impressed with Adobe's marketing. I mean, I'm biased. They were a client for many, many years. But I really feel like they, at a broad level, they would really kind of get into like creating a new narrative and a lot of the experience economy and experience this. I mean, that really came from Adobe trying to up level B2B. I think what Microsoft has been doing lately has just been awesome. I really am proud of Satya and Chris Capicella, their CMO, bringing humanity and leading with humility. I just think they just do a great job. And even if you dig into some of their pages, like, the boring pages, like Microsoft 365 for enterprise, it's really good. Like it gets clean, and I think they've avoided the gobbledygook. There's a few others that I like, smaller, like companies like Move Forward, like most people don't care about, but I was just looking at their site the other day. I was like, that's really clean. Because what they realize and what you see is, am I trying to convince you, and this is my tidbit for everybody in argument, are you trying to convince me, if I'm going to convince you of something, am I trying to convince you how I was convinced or how I think you might be convinced? So Ajay, earlier in the program, you talked about tennis. And so now I know that about you. And so what can I use that, like, what do I know about you to help you convince you to go do something rather than what it took me to convince? So if I was explaining, hey, I had this really great lunch, and I had it because it was home and it was my kids were here and it was healthy and it was easy to do. Or do I convince you like, hey, that lunch was really good, and AJ, you would like it because if you're getting hit on the court later, it's going to loosen you up. It's not too heavy and it's going to keep you hydrated. Like, that's me putting you first and making the argument about you, not what convinced me to do it. And you see it in messaging all the time. And we talk about customer first, and we forget to do it because we get excited like about the product ourselves. Take that excitement, think about what it would take to convince the person you're talking to from their perspective to go do that thing. And it's a subtle difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. And so with that, I think some of the taglines I really like in the B2B space, I think AWS with Build On is great. Like, that was awesome. Build On, like, and it's inspiring. And they know the developer. They can speak developer all day long. So it's those types of those moments where you really think, I'm helping my customer do something better from the customer's point of view.
Obviously, Eric, it's easier to do with sales. A lot of sales messages we all get are clearly copied and pasted from 5 years ago, and they've been using the same message. So I presume it works on someone. But how do you do that in B2B marketing and still kind of keep it personalized while kind of creating this huge demand gen effort?
Yeah, AJ, that's a really great question. There's another kind of truth of marketing that you have to like unlearn. And that is that we were taught at one point, like brand consistency, like in message consistency. And, you know, it's just like, if I consistent with the message enough that people will be able to repeat it and then they'll go do it. And that might be true, especially in consumer. But in B2B, we have a big problem. And that is all the kind of consumerization of content, like, how much the consumer's in control has transferred to the B2B sale. And for marketers, what that means is that a disproportionate amount of the customer journey at B2B is squarely sitting with the marketing team and not the sales team. So long are the days where we could take them out for steak dinner and Billy Joel concerts and like go close the deal. Like we have to be able to binge all the content, so all the gated content, that's got to go. We have to be able to allow people not to go on a journey, but to, Netflixize all the content. And so the trick with that is consistency, therefore, doesn't play right. Like if you just keep saying the same thing over and over again, I get frustrated. It'd be like watching the same episode on Netflix. You're like, oh my gosh, when's this going to move on? And so what marketers need to do is move away from consistency and to coherence, meaning do the messages cohere, not exactly word for word, but do they sit around that same argument? So if you go back to that argumentative structure, then you can sit here and say, wow, so I'm not going to say like, is data at the core of your recovery strategy? I'm not going to say that 1,000 times. I'm going to get a bunch of evidence and messaging around that one idea, and they're going to cohere together. And then I'm going to go to the next thing, and then I'm going to get that all to cohere. And so if you're watching the barrage of content that's coming at you, but that marketing can do, because we can spam, holy cow, can we spam, and we can put you in nurture paths and we can do all this stuff. But if it begins to cohere together, you will start to look at it as an audience and then start adding your own ideas to it. Because you're like, yeah, that makes sense because I saw this other thing over here. And I saw this over here. And now I've got the audience is doing the logic for me. And that's what gets powerful. If they can do the thinking, then it's their idea, not mine. And then that is, now they're persuading me to buy their product, right? It's really hard to do, but you have to break, and I have to break marketing teams from saying, no, we're consistent. We're going to use the same image and the same tagline, and that's it. And the world is messy, but if you can build that coherent strategy, your messaging will work a lot better.
Yeah, and Eric, I failed to ask this at the beginning of the show, but I was, I like to ask it oftentimes. Why has it been B2B marketing for you, say the last, 15 years or so?
That's a great question. I don't think because no one from B2C has ever asked me.
Yeah, we've heard answers like that before. We've said like B2C is sexy and I just couldn't get into it. And then I went B2B. I'm like, hey, come on. I love B2B marketing.
For what I love is, first of all, I'll almost end with, I hate advertising. I just can't stand it, which is, of course, ironic because how much we have done as far as policy and helping advertising move forward. I've been to the Cannes Lions Advertising Festival for 15 plus years in a row. So it's like I've been in it, but I just don't like it because I find it, I like persuasion, but not manipulation. And I think what we are doing for B2B matters. It matters because these companies do set policy. They do set like the stuff that we've written around privacy, for example, or speeches that we have written around gender equality in the workplace. Like those are all extensions within this industry, and we can make a big difference. Like we can really, really make a difference. I don't really get that excited about selling a car or selling a diamond ring or selling things that you probably don't even need anyway. And so, but I like this because, you know, what we're trying to do in B2B is often make companies better and make them like, there's that inkling, there's a reason why some entrepreneur, someone like me, came up with an idea and said, I want to do this and I want to try to do this at scale, but eventually it breaks. And if we can help them keep growing, because growth will break any company, it's just a matter of when. And so if you can help them grow, then you help that idea permeate. And B2C, I just don't see that. I just think it's like, how many more hamburgers can we get off? And so I don't actually find it very sexy. I find it just not as intellectually interesting.
No, I like that. I like that take on it. Now, you know, Eric, this is where we kind of get into a few more of the, we just have a few minutes left, you know, a few more of the personal before we wrap up here. Tell us what, you know, what are some of your interests? What do you enjoy doing? You're out and, you know, you have a cool brewery hat on there. Tell us about that. Are you a beer guy? What's, you know, what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, definitely a practicing alcoholist. So, yeah, I mean, craft drinks, I just love craft wine and craft beer. Just, I love it. I just find it very interesting. It's something I couldn't do. Like, I feel like if I tried really, really, really hard, I would only be like this much, like this good at it, where these other people are like this good. So, and I enjoy drinking it. Yeah, this is from Snorting Elk, which is up in Crystal Mountain in Washington State. It's where I ski. And this is, they have a ton of breweries. So nothing's better than doing a hard day of skiing and having a brew. I do long distance running because after a run, you can go have a brew. I like to play tennis. Ajay, let's go play. Then you can have a brew. You're connecting. You're right. You're seeing the connection. But perhaps the thing I love the most and got me through school is music. As a saxophone, I play saxophone and piano. And,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so my whole family, my whole family is in music, and so that is my happiest moments, just sitting playing on the piano.
I love it. And the last question, because we ask all our guests, this question has become a staple here at the Marketing Stir. LinkedIn, when someone reaches out to you, what do you hate that they do, and what gets Eric Duerr to accept a LinkedIn request?
Boy, if I don't know them, I'm pretty picky on LinkedIn.
Same.
Yeah, so it's got to be. There was one guy who reached out. I did not know him. He was Australian. He said, hey, Eric, I saw that you worked at Rocket Fuel. I helped with a TED presentation for one of the founders. I'm now looking for a job in Seattle. I noticed you were at Yestler. Would you hook me up? And I mean, check. You did your homework.
Mm-hmm.
You were clear with the ask. You showed that even though we didn't have anyone in common, we kind of did have someone in common. And I went to bat for this guy. I took a phone call. I said, give me a call. He was brilliant. He was over at IBM looking to move over. And I got involved with his whole story with him and his new bride, and landed them, I connected them with everyone I knew. Never
That's
met
awesome.
the guy. Yeah. So do your homework, right? And
I like that.
Again, persuasion. What do you want this person to go do?
Yeah.
And he tapped in that pathos, right? And he had a little bit of ethos, and then very clear of the ask.
I love it. I love it. That's a great way to end the podcast. Eric, this has been fun. I've had a smile on my face the entire time. I love your stories. I love your energy. I love what Domo is doing, and they have a huge renewal rate, which we didn't get to talk about, but we had some great conversations here. This has been an amazing episode of the Marketing Stir. I'm Vincent Petrofessa. That's Ajay Gupta. He's been Eric Duerr, the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Domo. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista. Please like, rate, and subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, email us at info@themarketingstir.com. And thanks for listening.